Hey guys, it's time to talk about the weather pattern over the next few weeks and what could be the development of a western United States heat wave as we get into June. Today's May 27th, and let's jump right in. So we're starting off with the EPS model, which is basically the average of all the European ensemble runs put together. And we're also looking at the 500 millibar height anomalies, or looking at where we got ridges and troughs at the moment. Areas in orange and red are ridges or high pressure areas, and then areas in blue and purple are troughs or areas of low pressure at the jet stream level. So, as this is starting off at the moment for today, and you can see we have a trough over much of the central United States. That was one of the causes of the severe thunderstorms over the past couple of days. And then also notice to the south of that, we have a pretty strong ridge over Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico. That's been causing the heat wave over Mexico over the past few weeks, breaking record high temperatures. And each one of these lines you see is what's called an isohypsy, or an area of equal height. And once you get numbers that reach 591 and 594, that tells you that you got a pretty strong heat dome in place. And like I said, we have a 594 isohypsy here across Mexico, and so that tells us that we have a pretty strong heat dome over the country there, and that's the reason why we've been getting all those record high temperatures and that extreme heat wave down there for the past few weeks now, like I just said. And so as we play this out, notice how we have that trough starts to push further to the east over the next couple of days. We get a ridge between that, potentially another trough moving in across the northern tier of the U.S. into southern portions of Canada. But then once we get deeper into June, by around June 2nd, 3rd, 4th, we could potentially get a pretty strong western U.S. ridge that develops. And whenever you get a ridge that develops out west, you have to get a trough downstream. So we have the development of a trough across the eastern United States. And then by the time we get into possibly beyond June 5th, the EPS is showing what could be a very strong ridge of high pressure over the western United States. And like I said, these isohypses, we're getting numbers reaching 591 here. So we could be talking about a potential heat dome that sets up somewhere across the Rocky Mountains as we get beyond June 5th. And that lingers all the way to the end of this model cycle. And remember, this is an average of all the ensembles from the European. So we get, as we even all the way out to June 10th, we could potentially be talking about this western U.S. ridge, and with a downstream trough over the eastern United States. Now, this would cause a lot of above normal temperatures for the western U.S. and below normal temperatures for the east for the first 10 days of June, possibly even beyond that, because this is as far as the model run goes. And I also want to compare this to what the GEFS and the CMCE are saying. Two other models. The GEFS is the GFS model and all its ensembles put together, and the CMCE is the Canadian model and all its ensembles averaged out. So here's the GEFS model for the same time, June 11th. Notice it's showing the same idea with the ridge in the west and a trough in the east. And the Canadian model, the CMCE, it's also showing a large ridge by June 10th, but it's a bit further to the east than what the European and what the American are saying. And because of that, it pushes that trough even further to the east across New England and far eastern Canada. Me personally, I would agree with more what the EPS and GEFS are saying, with the ridge further out over the Rocky Mountains and the trough over much of the eastern U.S. for the first 10 days of June. And so next I'm going to look at temperature anomalies from the EPS model going out over the next 2 weeks. Notice how we have a lot of below normal temperatures across the east, and then by the time we get into early June, these orange colors are indicating some pretty far above normal temperatures across the west and the Rocky Mountain area, under that large ridge that could potentially develop. We could potentially be talking about a heat wave over much of the west if this large heat dome potentially develops over that area in the first few days of June. And then with that downstream trough, we could be talking about more average to even slightly below normal temperatures across much of the east and the east coast for the early part of June. And then just playing this out all the way to the end, all the way to around June 10th, we have continued potentially way above normal temperatures across the Rocky Mountain area, and even some slightly below normal temperatures across the east under that downstream trough. And then just looking at the forecast max temperatures, don't take these numbers too seriously. I just want to show you guys an idea of what the EPS is saying with how warm this temperature start to get as we get into June. Notice how in all of the lowland areas across the west, the EPS is showing temperatures getting as high as the upper 90s. Places like Salt Lake City, Boise, Idaho, the lowlands of eastern Washington, much of Nevada, the Central Valley of California potentially could get up to 100 degrees if this heat wave develops, if this large heat dome develops out west. And then obviously the deserts of the southwest could get as high as 110 degrees under that. But with that being said, also that downstream trough would mean a lot of temperatures only in the 70s across the Great Lakes region and the Northeast. And I just want to compare the max temperatures to the other two models. Notice how the American model of GEFS is very similar to what the European is saying. For June 9th, they're almost identical because they both have the ridge out west and the trough to the east for this time period. But with the Canadian model that was showing that ridge further to the east, it's showing a lot more hotter temperatures for the middle of the country and the Midwest region. But like I said, I agree more with what the GFS and European are saying. I think the Canadian is a bit more of an outlier at the moment with the ridge further to the east. But it's something to keep an eye on with this potentially developing pattern over the next couple of weeks. And then lastly, I just want to look at some precipitation totals over the next 2 weeks, just to give you an idea where could get the most rain expected, and it also gives you an idea where we expect a lot of thunderstorms. The Canadian and the European model are both showing a lot of rain potentially over the middle of the country here. That indicates that we could still be talking a lot of severe thunderstorm outbreaks for the middle of the country, something that's been happening for the past few weeks now, even over the past month. Non-stop severe thunderstorm outbreaks across that portion of the country. And both models are also showing a lot of rain for the Northeast, something that hasn't happened a whole lot over the past month. So it's good to see some rainfall in that area there. And even the Canadian model is still also in agreement with this. It's also showing a lot of rain potentially over the middle of the country, still indicating that thunderstorms are still going to be occurring over the next couple of weeks in this area like they have been. And it's also showing a lot of rain for the Northeast region as well. So all three models are in pretty good agreement about where the most rainfall will happen over the next 2 weeks. And yeah, so just to summarize, we have this pattern change coming potentially with both the EPS and GEFS models showing a ridge developing out west as we get into June, leading to a potential heat dome and a potential heat wave developing out there. Something that I feel like's been happening over the past few years as we get into June, we just get this large heat dome that develops over the west. And whenever you get a ridge, you have to get a downstream trough. So both of the models are showing a trough developing over the east. That would bring some slightly below normal temperatures potentially for much of the eastern United States as we get into June. And it'll lessen the likelihood of a heat wave in that area. And then the Canadian, like I said, is showing that ridge placement a little bit further to the east as we get into June. Something to keep an eye on how far west or how far east this ridge develops. Like I said, I agree more with what the European and what the American model are saying at the moment. But it's something to keep an eye on with this heat wave developing. And with that being said, that's all I got for today. I'll put this all in the video description for you to read. I hope you all have a good day, guys, and I'll see you next time.